Live stream check 2, 3. Hi, Councillor Corey. Could we just do a quick microphone check, please? Councillor Corey, can you hear us?
Sorry, was that to me? I can now hear you. Good evening. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you, Councillor.
Are we told Owen we want to stop?
Yeah, we're good, Owen.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm relieved that we're not all in the park smashing pumpkins. So, I am Martin Warnes, the chair of the Planning Committee, and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. To begin with, there are a few matters of housekeeping. Action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being live streamed to the council's YouTube page and will be available after the meeting. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants please mute the microphones when not speaking. I will now ask the committee to introduce themselves, starting from my left.
Councillor McSpindler, substituting for Tracy Arnold, Shrub End Ward.
Sam McLean, representing Newtown and Christchurch Ward.
Councillor Will Calverley, representing Tiptree Wards.
Lee Tate, representing Prettygate Ward.
Robert Davidson, representing Mersey and Payfleet Ward.
Catherine Spindler, representing the Saints.
Councillor Mark Gosher, representing Castle Ward.
Councillor Jackie McLean, Markstone Lair Ward.
Chris Pearson, Councillor for Beerchurch, substituting for Councillor Rippingate.
Chris Harden, Planning Officer.
John Miles, Planning Officer.
Simon Keynes, Joint Head of Planning.
Madeline Rolosner, Democratic Services Officer.
Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. And members will notice that Madeline Rolosma has joined us, and she will be taking over the role that Rob Carmichael did, and we hope that Rob is doing well in his new job with Norwich City Council. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. If necessary, we will take a break at 7:30 p.m. and then every 90 minutes afterwards. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room. Whilst determination of a planning application is not a quasi-judicial process, unlike certain licensing functions carried out by the local authority, it is a formal administrative process involving the application of national and local policies. Reference to legislation and case law, as well as rules of procedure, rights of appeal, and an expectation that people will act reasonably and fairly. All involved in these decisions should remember that the possibility that an aggrieved party may seek a judicial review and or complain to the Ombudsman on grounds of maladministration or a breach of the authority's code. So, item 2 is substitutions. I've been informed that Councillor Spindler is, that's Mick Spindler is here in the place of Councillor Tracy Arnold, and Councillor Chris Pearson is here in the place of Councillor Kaylee Rippingale. Are there any other substitutions? Can't see any. So item 3, declarations of interest. Councillors must publicly announce the item number and whether the interest is a disclosable, pecuniary or any other registrable or non-registrable interest. Can't see anyone putting their hands up for declarations of interest. Item 4, urgent items. There are no urgent items. Item 5, have your say. If anyone has a petition they wish to present to me on any of the matters on the agenda this evening, please do so now. I don't see anyone wishing to do that, so item 6 is minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of June 2025 are before the committee for confirmation. Are there any points of accuracy that need to be raised? I don't see any. So we move on to item 7, and I will read out the application and the speakers on your say list. Okay, I just note that we have speakers for 7.1, but 7.2 is under the drop procedure, and therefore we cannot take either en bloc. So item 7.1 is application 240409. Application is an outline application with all matters reserved except access for the erection of up to 25 bungalows and a care home of up to 60 beds, and it's land of Croquet Gardens, Wivenhoe. Recommended for approval. John Miles will be presenting, Meg Miller will be speaking against, Robert Pomeroy for, and Councillor Corey on Zoom is the visiting councillor speaking. 7.2 is application number 250348. It's an outline application with all matters reserved except access for erection of up to 7 dwellings with parking and access, Landor Valley Crescent, West Burgoll. And the recommendation was for approval, and Chris Harding is presenting, and because it's a drop procedure, there's no representation from the public. So we'll go to item 7.1, and I will invite John Miles to present the report. This is Landorf Croquet Garden, Wivenhoe. John.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. So item 7.1, land off Croquet Gardens, Wivenhoe. I don't know why it's not gone to full screen. Yeah. Apologies, bear with me on my minute. Yeah. Apologies, I'll try the web version, see if that works. That's working. So item 7.1, land off Croquet Gardens. The application seeks outline planning consent, all matters reserved except access for up to 25 dwellings and a care home of up to 60 beds. This is the location plan, and it shows the application site bound red, and the wider blue line shows the land that is also within the applicant's ownership and includes the Cross Pit local wildlife site to the north, which is also identified as open space in the local plan. The application site itself is allocated for residential development within the Wivenhoe Neighbourhood Plan under policy WIV 28. The location plan also identifies an area of land that's proposed to be gifted to Wivenhoe Town Council for an allotment or community orchard use, and that is shown on the plan in red, as well as an area of land shown in yellow earmarked for the provision of informal car park for users of the cricket club and visitors to the open space. There are permissive footpaths across the wider site, which are shown on the plan in light blue. There are also public rights of way to the northwest and north, which may be a bit difficult to make out, but they're near the edge of the blue line in orange. As part of the application, there are proposals to make improvements to the surfacing of these footpath routes to the west and north, where the footpaths link to Fieldway to the west, Henrietta Close to the north, and the application site boundary to the east, with the works proposed to be secured by condition. An initial cause for concern was that the original proposal site boundary extended beyond the neighboured plan allocation area. However, the plans have since been amended, and it is considered that the site boundary, as revised, complies with the allocation boundary in the neighboured plan. This is the indicative location plan, and this is the indicative site plan, which shows in a bit more detail. As noted, this is an outline application, so the details at this stage are illustrative, and this plan is not proposed to form part of the approved documents. It does, however, give an idea of how the quantum of development proposed could be accommodated within the site. The area shown in blue on the plan is an area of land identified as being susceptible to surface water flood risk. However, as outlined in the committee report, it's considered that the development can proceed without undue risk to people or property from flooding, including through adopting a layout which avoids dwellings and means of enclosure within the affected area, such as shown on the indicative layout. And lastly, this is the proposed access plan, showing the proposed vehicular and pedestrian connection points with Croquet Gardens. I'll go through some photos, and I'll start with this aerial image, which hopefully provides some context for the site images that are to follow. This aerial image is taken facing north with the approximate site boundary in red. Please note that some of the features shown on the base layer may have changed since the image was taken, but hopefully it's still useful in terms of a general appreciation of the surrounding context. So notable points, as I say, the wildlife site to the northeast, seen top here. You have Wivenow Cricket Club to the northwest. Existing residential development, which fronts Rectory Road here to the south, and then you can just about make out the proposed access via Croquet Gardens here to the west. And this is a view looking in the opposite direction, so looking south, you have the existing allotments in the foreground, the cricket club, and the proposed application site with the backdrop of existing residential development. Now moving to the photos, this is a view from the junction where Croquet Gardens meets Rectory Road, and this is views up Rectory Road from that junction and down in the opposite direction. A view back up Croquet Gardens, looking west, view in the opposite direction, and this is a closer view of the proposed site access. This is a view from within the application site itself, and this is facing south, and this is a wider view across the site in the same direction. You can see the existing development which fronts Rectory Road in the distance. And this is a view from the southern edge of the site, facing north. A view further up the site, again looking north, and further north still, this is, shows the boundary with the cricket club in the distance. And this is 180, turning 180, looking south across the application site. Here are some images from land beyond the north of the application site, which includes the fishing lake as shown, and some views of the existing footpaths which are adjacent but outside the main application site boundary. I'll finish here on this plan and do a quick summary of the main material planning considerations. So notably, the proposal would deliver sustainably located homes and specialist housing suitable for older people on a site allocated within the neighbourhood plan. The application also provides an opportunity for wider social benefits, including the provision of land for community allotments or orchards, an informal car park, and improvements to existing footpaths. There is also considered to be sufficient information to be confident that, subject to conditions, the development will not expose future occupiers to unacceptable risks from either contamination or flooding. While matters such as flood risk, highways, arboricultural and amenity impacts will require further consideration at the reserved matters stage, on the basis of the information available, suggests that a policy compliance scheme can be delivered within the parameters of the outline application. Although the development will inevitably alter the character of the site by introducing built form where none currently exists, this has been accepted in principle through the site's allocation. The positive economic and social effects of the development are considered to be afforded significant weight, particularly the delivery of housing, which is strongly supported by the framework and weighs strongly in favour of the scheme. In conclusion, it's considered that the benefits of the scheme outweigh any adverse impacts identified, and the planning balance tips in favour of approval. The recommendation made to members is therefore one of approval, subject to conditions and the signing of a Section 106 agreement as outlined in the committee report. Thank you for listening, and happy to take any questions after this evening's speakers.
Thank you, John. So I now invite Meg Martin to come and speak. You have up to 3 minutes when you press the red button, and the bell will go off at 2, and I'll be looking for you to wind up once the bell goes. Thank you.
I'm here informally presenting on behalf of the majority of the residents of Croquet Gardens, most of whom are away on holiday. Our key objections relate to excess water and flooding and contamination, which then feeds into the already polluted River Colne, both of which Wivenhoe Town Council are also concerned about. Then the excessive size of the care home and its inappropriate location, and the planning condition that 20% should be affordable housing not being met. So, flooding and drainage. The excess water which flows into Gleeblands Houses Lake at the bottom of Rectory Hill should be exceptional, but it's already frequent. It's likely that drainage downhill from this new development will exacerbate these issues. Contamination. Gleeblands has provided ample evidence of contamination by arsenic and heavy metals over many years, resulting in dead and deformed fish, dead birds, dead and dying trees, and absence of pondweed, the sources of which have still not been established. Surely it's unwise to excavate the old landfill site and dig foundations here until the contamination has properly identified, contained, and mitigated. Size and care home and location. The Wivenhoe Neighbourhood Plan specifies up to 25 dwellings here, which is a strict maximum limit, which we've no objections to in number and which you would not permit developers to exceed. Yet there's no compliance with the local plan with regard to the proposed size of the care home. The Wivenhoe Neighbourhood Plan specifies it should be up to 30 beds, not the 60 as in the latest application. Where's the data to prove that this increase in size is needed? A multi-storey 60-bed home care would be institutional, not a home. It's much too large and overbearing for this small site and would generate excess traffic day and night along residential streets. The proposed care home will be the biggest building in Wivenhoe by far. It's not appropriate to locate it in a quiet residential cul-de-sac at the far end of town with poor access. Rectory Road is narrow and always obstructed by on-street parking. We believe it should be on the main Colchester Road into Wivenhoe for easy access by staff, visitors, service vehicles, especially ambulances which may need to get there very quickly 24 hours a day. By the fire station opposite the flag is the optimum location where care home traffic won't disturb residents. It's also got a safe pelican crossing to local shops, including the chemist, One Stop, hairdressers, fish and chips and a restaurant. Croquet Gardens have none of these facilities within easy walking distance. And lastly, the risk of ball strike. The report underestimates the ability of the teams that play cricket here, which include overseas professionals and is not just for recreational use. Balls are hit well out of the ground every week and over the existing high protective netting, as the residents of Hollow Tree House in Croquet Gardens can confirm. 6 on average in the last fortnight. The proposed care home adjacent to Hollow Tree House will also be within range, and its residents and staff will be at risk of being hit. Further protective netting would be an eyesore and would not be effective. Thank you. That's the end.
Thank you very much. I now call upon Robert Pomrey to come to the desk and speak. You have 3 minutes once you press the button, and the bell will go off at 2, and I'll be looking for you to start winding up at that point. Go ahead.
Good evening. As members will know, planning decisions should be plan-led, and in this case, the plan is both the local plan and Wivenhoe Neighbourhood Plan. The application site is allocated precisely for this development in the Wivenhoe Neighbourhood Plan policy with 28. The policy is prescriptive, setting out exactly what needs to be provided on the site and on the land close to the site in the applicant's ownership. When such policies exist, obtaining planning permission should be a relatively simple task, as the policies become the blueprint for the content of the proposal, and provided that each of the policy criteria are met by the proposed development, then planning permission should follow. In this case, the proposal is policy compliant, as the plans and other submissions made by the applicant meet all the policy criteria, and as a result, your officers now recommend approval. The fact that the proposal does not include the provision of affordable housing does not conflict with the development plan, as both the local plan policy DM5 and neighbourhood plan WIV 28 expressly say that the provision of affordable housing is subject to the viability of the scheme. The viability of this scheme has been assessed, and that assessment has been carefully scrutinised by your own viability consultants, who accept that the development cannot support affordable housing or other contributions. Therefore, this element of the proposal continues to be policy compliant. One of the reasons, but not the sole reason, why viability is a challenge on this and on other sites is the cost of delivering the non-negotiable 10% biodiversity net gain, which in this case amounts to a cost on the development of £326,363. Incredibly, development is now enhancing biodiversity at the literal expense of providing affordable homes. Getting this application to committee has taken around 18 months, during which time the applicants have met with Wivenhoe Town Council and officers to refine the proposals and to ensure they comply with the development plan. As compliance has been accepted by your officers, planning approval is recommended. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now call upon the visiting councillor, Councillor Corey, who will be speaking to you via Zoom. You have 5 minutes and the bell will go off after 4. Carry on, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Thank you for listening on this, and I understand the points put forward by the speaker just now, but also the number of objections by residents that you would have seen included in the pack and on the website. This is a hot topic. Wivenhoe Neighbourhood Plan absolutely sets out this site for development, and I believe the developers can do a development here that would be policy compliant, but I feel a number of objections still need to be raised, and you should defer and look into this further or object for the following reasons. So the committee would have been briefed about the viability issues of the site. This site was bought over a decade ago as a land bank, and it's something the developer has been seeking to develop for some time. I appreciate the officers have secured an agreement about collecting 106 contributions and affordable housing if or when the development becomes viable to do so. This is a compromise, but a compromise too far at this stage, in my opinion. The council and this committee are not here to help subsidise development or developers. We aren't here to roll over and allow development that fails to meet the most fundamental policy requirements, such as 20% affordable housing. Instead, here we're here to regulate and to intervene. And my strong suggestion is that the site could be made more viable if the design and massing of the development was done differently. For example, more semi-detached bungalows, allowing for some smaller affordable housing units. Allowing for such a compromise at this stage of viability and not delivering affordable at this outline planning stage, for me, means it should not pass, as it does not meet our very strict affordable housing quota. Secondly, the Wivenhoe Neighbourhood Plan Policy 1634 outlines the requirement for a 30-bed residential care home. This development states a 60-bed care home. I believe that this number has been reached to make the development again more viable and marketable to a care home provider. This is not what residents expected as per the neighbourhood plan, and this will give a greater visual impact on neighbouring properties. It will also increase or double traffic flow to the 60 instead of 30-bed care home. However, we are not making changes. We're sort of made changes here to enable 60 beds rather than 30, but we haven't made those changes in design or massing to affect the ability to put affordable homes into the scheme. So surely a compromise can be made on both. If we're going to increase the beds at the care home, we could look at trying to make the scheme compliant with affordable housing with different massing and design on this site. Point 3 for me is that the Wivenhoe Neighbourhood Plan outlines in 17.24 accessible public open space will be required to provide it on this site, and I don't see this in the outline plans. I thank the officer, John Miles, for explaining to me how this should be delivered in the detailed plans, but I haven't seen it here, and I'm worried that, again, that could be squeezed and we won't have accessible public open space for the people who would come here and reside. That cannot be compromised on and must be guaranteed and of suitable size. My 4th point is about the contamination of the local watercourse. That has been a concern for residents, and the Glebe House lake has been contaminated, and we are still unsure of exactly where that contamination is coming from. I understand reports have been made on this site, and this site is not seen as the cause of that, but I do believe if you are to defer or pass it, that extra conditions need to be placed on monitoring the ground water and where those minerals and where it's infiltrating the lake and causing contamination. Where is that coming from? It needs to be monitored closely. And to conclude, I'm not against this development. I'm not against this development because it is in the neighbourhood plan. But what I do object to is the breaking of the neighbourhood plan policies and the Colchester local plan policies for affordable housing. Too many compromises have been made, in my opinion, for the developer, and the council and the committee are here to regulate and enforce our planning policy, not to support developers to achieve a decent margin. So I would say that the developer should be challenged to find better solutions on this site to make it viable. I do not believe it's been challenged enough, and it should be deferred or objected to on that basis to make the site redesigned, reconsidered, to make it more policy compliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. So I'll invite John to comment on the points raised, and any member wishing to speak, if you could indicate to Mick on my left, and he will then feed that to me when the time for members to take part comes. John, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a few matters raised. I'll try and go through them in the order that they were raised. So there was concerns raised about flood risk and drainage. The site is in flood zone 1, so it's generally at low risk of flooding, but as was shown on that plan, there is an area susceptible to surface water flood risk down the centre of the site, but the indicative site plan shows how built form can be avoided in that area. Modelling and SUDS information has also been submitted, which has been considered in consultation with ECC SUDS in their role as lead local flood authority, and they have no objection to the scheme, subject to conditions to secure an appropriate scheme of surface water management. In terms of contamination, it is appreciated that there does appear to be evidence of contamination in the wider area, but the main consideration in the context of this application is to ensure that effectively the application does not make any existing problematic situations worse, nor does it expose future occupiers to any unacceptable risk. There has been investigation work on site with regards to contamination risk. There's been both a phase 1 and a phase 2 contamination assessment undertaken, and the phase 2 report included intrusive ground testing, which didn't identify any significant sources of contamination on the application site itself. However, it does recommend some measures to help mitigate potential ground gas risk associated with the former landfill use, but a raft of conditions has been recommended by the Council's Contaminated Land Officer, which is considered to address those issues. Moving on to the size of the care home. So officers do not consider that the size of the care home proposed results in any conflict with the neighbourhood plan policy with 28. The allocation policy states that the site is allocated for a residential care home, but does not specify in with 28 a number of bedrooms. It is recognised by officers that in some of the supporting wording for the neighbourhood plan, there is mention to 30 beds. So paragraph 1611 says it's difficult to ascertain numbers of Wivenhoe residents currently in out-of-area care homes, but it is felt that a care home of up to 30 beds is needed in Wivenhoe in the future. So that wording itself recognises it's difficult to put an exact number on the need, and officers also do not consider that that sets a ceiling on the care home number, particularly in the absence of identifiable harm with regards to wider material planning considerations. Viability and affordable housing. Appreciate the strength of feeling on those topics, and that's also something that officers have considered very seriously, and the applicant's viability assessment has been subject to significant scrutiny. When the original viability assessment was submitted, a deficit was identified of around 2.5 million. Following the scrutiny and an independent review, the existing deficit is closer to 200,000. So it's gone from 2.5 million to 200,000, and that is as a result of that scrutiny and that detail that has been given and that consideration. So it's certainly not just a case of taking the numbers at their word. They have been assessed, they have been independently assessed, and officers do consider that the information provided does provide sufficient evidence that the scheme at this time is not viable. As outlined though, that is not to say there is no possibility of securing further contributions. The Section 106 is recommended to include quite a detailed viability review mechanism, which will be a multi-stage review. So in the event that there is a surplus in the future, that can be secured with priority given to on-site affordable, followed by commuted sums towards affordable housing. And it's not considered there's any conflict with policy in respect of affordable housing, because both the policies in the Wivenhoe Neighbourhood Plan and the Section 2 local plan recognise that there are viability considerations to the provision of affordable housing. I think the last 2 points were ball strike, potential conflicts between the cricket club use and the development proposed. A ball strike assessment has been submitted and reviewed by Sport England, who raised no objection. The ball strike report estimates a height of 0 metres at the nearest indicative location for the informal car park. But if members continue to have concerns on that point, I'm happy to take further questions. I think in terms of design, layout, massing, ultimately, those are reserved matters. In terms of increasing efficiency, more semi-detached dwellings, it's going to be a balance ultimately, because if you're making the dwellings smaller to try and get more on, they'll be worth less, which will impact viability. So really that, I think, is a matter for the applicant to consider at reserved matter stage. But as I say, it will be subject to a viability review at that stage. Hopefully that covers everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other officer wanting to contribute, so I will invite members of the committee to ask any questions, discuss and debate the proposals, and I have Robert Davison wishing to speak, and when Robert Davison has finished, could Mark Gocher be ready to speak? Robert, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I have significant concerns about this. It's almost a rerun of the old Abro site, where we had basically no social housing because of viability problems. I understand that viability is assessed and not the site value is included, but it has been sitting on the developer has had 10 or 20 years to develop this site. The B&G costs, I have to say, I'm wary of, because actually you can buy more land up in Scotland or elsewhere for less than that money that's been quoted by the developer. And more importantly, I think what we want is something that's good for the village. And you've got a care home that's over double the size of what the village is expecting. For me, we've had other care homes that have been converted into homelessness housing or other things recently in the city, and actually, you know, what are we trying to achieve here? This is meant to be for local people, and I think, you know, we've lost the plot, if I'm absolutely honest. The other thing I'm concerned about is the cricket ground. You've got the car park adjacent to the cricket ground, but actually there's no way of making sure that the car park or the cricket ground are secure from the balls that are flying left, right, and centre. We've just seen from the national 100 ball series that actually there's a lot of sixes being flown about, and as the objector has already said, actually a lot of these are professional teams, not necessarily local boys playing. So I'd like to suggest that actually we certainly either refuse this as it is because it doesn't achieve the culture, the council policies of affordable housing, and the care home is excessive in what's needed in the neighbourhood plan, or we can defer it and get the officers to discuss it with the applicant. I'll leave it there for now, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you happy for me to take other speakers, or do you want to convert that into a proposal?
I'm happy to listen to other speakers first.
Okay, thank you. Right, so I'll ask Mark Gocher to speak, and when Mark's finished, could Chris Pearson be ready to speak? Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I have mixed feelings about this one. One question I have is I'm trying to make out, or try to make out from the maps, where I don't think the map actually shows where the boundary is of the neighbourhood plan. Because I understand that the scheme is now compliant with that boundary after the revisions, but it'd be useful to see where that boundary actually was and what was originally being proposed, because I can see that the applicant does own a considerable amount of wild area around the site, and I'm wondering if they were proposing to stretch into that originally. So it'd be nice to see what the boundary actually was, basically. That's a question. In terms of the application, my main concern, to be honest, is not so much the care home, it's the lack of affordable housing. And it seems to me that the whole viability rule structure is absurd. Because on the one hand, you're having, like on this site, some quite large and probably quite expensive houses going up, and yet we're told it's still unviable, despite the high cost likely of what look like quite sizable family dwellings. If I was to suggest build smaller houses or flats, then they would say, well, they'll sell for less, and therefore that's equally unviable, if not more. So I'm struggling to understand how the viability rules could deliver any affordable housing in locations like this, in a nice-ish semi-rural area. So I'm wondering if officers have any insights as to what could be done within a site of that size to make it viable. In what changes could be made to the buildings and the type of dwellings built, the size, the layout, the structure, because to my untrained eye, I'm struggling to see how that could ever be put right. But that is a big concern of mine, because otherwise you're going to get developments like this without any affordable housing across the whole of rural Essex. But that's a big concern that I have, and I would like some kind of advice on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any issue with the size of the care home either. We know that there is an ever-increasingly ageing population, so the fact that it was suggested that about 30 might be needed, doubling that to 60 doesn't seem to me to be of major concern, and it fits within the with and O neighbourhood plan, I would suggest. But as with Councillor Gocher, I'm somewhat concerned about the way in which the viability structure works, so that we're asked to approve a planning application that instantly cuts out affordable housing. And I just wonder whether, I heard what Mr. Miles suggested might be possible going forward in terms of the final look of the development, whether we couldn't put some sort of condition in to ensure that there is at least some affordable housing, even if we can't reach our 30% expectation. Final point I wanted to make, and I will just put on record that I am not a cricket fan, but cricket balls coming outside the boundaries of the cricket club are the responsibility of the cricket club, and they are a nuisance. Therefore, any damage that would be caused by a cricket ball coming outside would be the cricket club's responsibility, not the responsibility of the developer or of the local community.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Yeah, a question I've got is there seems to be a wide variance between the developer putting forward a 2.5 million deficit and the council whittling that down to 137,000. So I'd like to know what the premises is of having an ongoing viability review process, because from what I'm seeing, there isn't any room for any affordable housing, and has the possibility of an off-site contribution being considered? So I don't see any other speakers, so if John could then respond to the questions that have been asked. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, officers feel that there is a strong reason for those viability review mechanisms, and they do serve an important purpose. So one of those is, as we touched upon, Wivenhoe is a very attractive place to live. We'd expect the houses to be popular. We would expect quite a premium on sold prices. So part of the reason you have that viability review, and it's multi-staged, is that then allows us to review the position when we're in receipt of more evidence effectively with regards to the viability. So if the houses sell above, say, average house prices in the area, there's then an opportunity that we can secure that surplus or some of that surplus, and then, as I said, that would either go priority to on-site affordable housing. If that's not realistic for any reason, that would then cascade to a commuted sum in lieu for off-site affordable housing. So while there is no affordable housing technically secured at this moment in time, with the scrutiny that's been given to that viability review, the viability situation is now marginal. So officers consider, we can't make any promises, but it is certainly possible that the viability will improve to the extent that there are some provisions made to affordable housing. And as we touched upon earlier, that isn't considered to be in conflict with the local plan or neighbourhood plan policies, which both explicitly reference viability as a potential barrier to the delivery of 30% affordable housing. And in terms of possibility for viability to improve, that is again linked to B&G. There is quite a reliance placed at the moment in the information submitted on off-site credits. Off-site credits are considered undesirable in mitigation hierarchy terms and from a viability perspective. So there are conditions included which will require the developer to give due regard to the wider land that they own and the possibility for ecological enhancements on that land, which would be desirable from an ecology perspective and a viability perspective, in that may result in savings with regards to B&G credits, which may then in turn give us additional monies towards affordable housing. So that, yeah, these issues have been carefully considered, and the conditions and the proposed heads of terms for the Section 106 have those issues in mind. If members are still concerned about bull strike potential in light of some of the local experience and evidence, then there is always the possibility to impose a condition requiring that prior to first occupation, bull stop netting is provided in accordance with a scheme which can be previously submitted and agreed in writing by the local planning authority. I think the last point was a query on the original site boundary. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the site allocation boundary originally exceeded the neighbourhood plan allocation. So that's the original site plan, which included a large section of the proposed care home, sort of one of the dwellings, some of the rear gardens. They all exceeded the allocation boundary, but as revised, the development is considered to now align with the boundary in the Wivenhoe neighbourhood plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got down there was a question asking officers about what they felt could be done in order to make the application viable, and I think that was related to possible wiggle room around the affordable housing. So, do members feel like that question was answered, or would you like greater detail from the officers? Councillor Tate.
I'm not entirely certain it's a particularly fair question to ask John, if I'm honest, because it's not, he doesn't do, he doesn't design planning sites, and I think it would be placing him in a different position.
Okay. Right, that is a fair comment. I was reflecting what was asked, but I understand that. So I will pick up on what Councillor Davison had put forward, which was to suggest either a refusal or a deferral. Could you elaborate on what direction you would like to propose the committee goes?
The officers have made a comprehensive report, and I'm very grateful for that. The problem is that an awful lot of what we've heard from Mr. Miles is still subject to the developer negotiating with them. And I think at the end of the day, this is the council's responsibility to get the best deal. And I'm just concerned that developers have a history of making things look particularly negative rather than positive. So I've heard what's been said. I'd like to ask Mr. Miles, is there any opportunity in deferring it, whether we'd get a more realistic opportunity to understand the costs and the opportunity for affordable housing?
Okay, but the onus is on us as to whether we ultimately want a deferral or not. Otherwise, you're asking the officers to show their hand before they've even gone back and tried to actually negotiate.
Sorry, Chairman. Forgive me. The officers have worked with the developers for months, if not years. I'm asking for their honest opinion as to whether they think there's an opportunity to bring affordable housing onto this site.
Right, okay. I'm picking up they're talking about an ongoing affordability review, so they're thinking that in the future the property values may well allow for that. But John, would you like to, or Simon, to answer the points asked?
Chair, if I may just chip in before John, there's some question around whether the viability appraisal that's been carried out is robust. And if I can assure you that it is extremely robust, members who attended the viability training may recall that it is quite a formalised process that doesn't rely on the amount paid for the land. It's based on other values, including benchmark land value, alternative use. The developer return is a fixed amount generally that any inspector would apply, and the build costs are taken from standard build costs for the UK at the present time. The crucial issue, I think, is the end value of the units, and that is slightly a grey area. So the mechanism that John has suggested would capture any uplift in the end value of those units, claw it back, and effectively that could then be applied to deliver affordable homes. But we have to appreciate that this is a robust methodology, and it isn't one where we can sort of go back and do a bit of horse trading. It is a formalised calculation carried out by experts in the field, and we have sought expert input on this, and it's been very robust. So the position you're now presented with is that currently the scheme is not viable, and that is based on all of those parameters, including build costs, the end value of the units, developer return, and land value. So all of those matters are not going to change. The only matter that may change is the end value of the units. And in the event that that did, we would claw that back. So I think if this is around viability, that point is covered off by the suggested approach. And we will do all we can to secure a return on that issue. If it's possible, it may not be possible. House prices are not buoyant at the moment, as you're probably aware. If anything, they've been on a bit of a downward trend. And, they are what they are. But we will do all we can based on the evidence to claw back for you. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I've taken from that is that we're looking at the possibility for affordable housing comes after the build and a sort of rise in prices. So it doesn't look to me as if there is room for the deferral or the refusal that you're asking. So do you still wish to progress that request?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm reassured by what Mr. Cairns has said and Mr. Miles. In both their contributions, they've said there is a real opportunity to potentially get affordable housing, and I think that's the issue. I've given up on the 60-bed care home because, as Councillor Pearson has said, actually there may be needs for it, but I will watch this space and see whether it's used for care homes or something else. So in that case, I'm withdrawing my suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson, you indicated you wish to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I think the first thing I would want to say is we need to be a bit careful in this committee about asking our officers to provide a value on properties, because they're not developers. So I take that on board, and I'm mindful of that in coming to my conclusion. As Councillor Davidson and Councillor Gocher have already indicated, I have concerns about viability assessments where they impact on affordable housing in part of a development. But hearing everything that I've heard this evening from our officers, I think I personally have no alternative but to go with the recommendation that's in front of us, and therefore I would propose that.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Tate. All those in favour, please show.
9.
Right. Are there anyone against? Any abstentions? Right. So would you like to read the result, please?
Thank you, Chair. That's 9 in favour, 1 against. The motion is carried.
And that's accepting the recommendation of approval. Thank you. So we'll move on to 7.2. And that is the outlined application with all matters reserved relating to land off of Valley Crescent, West Burgolt. This is a drop procedure, and therefore there are no further have your say or visiting councillor submissions. I'll invite Chris Harding to present the risk report. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application, there was a motion at the last committee to refuse it, as detailed in the committee report. So the application is for up to 7 dwellings with parking and access at Valley Crescent, West Burgolt. So I'll just show you a reminder of the site. So the site is redlined there, and I'll just quickly go through the layout, etc., so you can refamiliarise yourself with that. So the site located here, settlement limits just adjacent to the site. It's an aerial view relatively recently, so the site is in here. This is an aerial view around 20 years ago. So as you can see, it used to be scrub in the middle of it, but grew up within the site. TPO trees on the rear boundary here. This is the illustrative 6-dwelling layout submitted, showing avoidance of the majority of trees, including the important ones. That's just a layout of the trees and root protection areas, etc. And then just the photographs in sort of springtime, photographs in about May this year, late May. And looking back the other side of the site, boundary vegetation on the outer site towards the fields before foliage has been produced. Within the site, showing overgrown aspects, and again there. And then this is a recent photograph from August. You'll see the difference between May and August. You know, obviously the foliage has come out, which would be expected, to be honest. And then looking back the other way with the foliage out, and along the boundary with the fields, foliage out again from this August. And you'll see from the report that the risk of cost is outlined in paragraph 7.3, and the alternative options is outlined in paragraph 8.0, and then paragraph 10 indicates a suggested alternative refusal if you're not going to go for alternative options in paragraph 8. So I'll now pass you over to Simon, who wants to make a couple of comments about the background policies.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I felt it would be helpful to members just to run through some of the fundamental policies that underpin your decision this evening on this application. Much has been said with particular regard to the importance of the neighbourhood plan, something which I'm sure we are all incredibly supportive of as a piece of the statutory development plan. But I think the starting point for all of this has got to be our own local plan. And policy SP3, returning to the presentation if we may, of the local plan, states that development will be permitted within and adjoining settlements. And I think that is absolutely key. That aligns with the position in the NPPF and forms the wider overarching context in which you need then to proceed to look at the neighbourhood plan policies and the alleged conflict therein. Our adopted local plan policy OV2 sets out the criteria where we are dealing with development in the countryside, i.e. outside a development boundary for policy purposes. And in essence, what that policy does is require you to identify material harm. If we then return to the West Bergholt neighbourhood plan, there are two key policies in that plan. There is P9, which I will, can you?
Just Chairman, I did have the presentation up, so we removed it.
And in particular, Chair, I will just talk while Chris brings that policy up. Much has been made that that policy effectively precludes development outside the development boundary for West Bergholt. Now, if we return to the wording of that policy specifically, and this is a matter over which we have been grilled as officers at various inquiries in West Bergholt. Sorry, Chris, are we? You will see that that policy does not state that development will not be permitted outside the development boundary for West Bergholt. What it actually states is, can we go back to PP9, please, Chris? The settlement boundary is shown on map PP, is that PP9/1? Sorry, my eyesight is not that good. It's a bit of a strain. Thank you very much, Councillor Tate. Yes, so all that policy actually does is refer to the settlement boundary and also allocate sites specifically. Now, what we have to remember is that any development plan is not a closed list. The site allocations in that plan do not say there shall be no other development ever in that settlement, but what it then goes on to do at policy PP12 is to say development will not be supported in the area shown on map PP12 if and the crucial thing then follows is this is conditional upon if individually or cumulatively it would result in increasing the coalescence between West Bergholt Village and Braeswick. So if we then return to the plans which support those policies, this green area shows that area effectively exclusion zone by policy for new development, which would lead to coalescence. Now, as you can see, there's quite a gap between West Bergholt and Braeswick, and the site, I think if Chris can put his little cursor there, the site is just that little area there, a site which would traditionally have been referred to in the days of yore in planning as being rounding off of the settlement. So although it is outside the development boundary, it is actually very small, very discrete, and I would argue it would be extremely difficult to contend that this development is contrary to PP9, the coalescence policy, because as you can see, that really will make no difference to any coalescence under PP12 with Braeswick Village. There will be still a vast swathe of undeveloped land which would remain. This would be seen purely in the context of the existing built form of the settlement. So we then return really to OV2, our own local plan policy, which relates to development in countryside.
Just before you move on, apologies, but it may be the angle that I'm at, but I couldn't see where the cursor was.
Oh, apologies.
Sorry, Chairman, I'll go back to that and try and move it. Can you see a bit of a movement there?
Is there?
Just to the left of prominent slope.
So as you can see, really taken in the context of that whole dotted green area, we're dealing with a tiny little piece of land on the edge of that settlement. And we would have to argue for the policy to contrary to PP12 that that is giving rise to coalescence. Now, I would hope, members, that you can agree with me that there is no such coalescence that would result from that particular development. So if we then return to our own local plan policy OV2, which sets out the relevant criteria against which development in the countryside outside defined settlement boundaries will be considered, and it says it will need to demonstrate that the scheme respects the character and appearance of landscapes and the built environment and preserves or enhances the historic environment. Well, there is no real historic environment issue here, and biodiversity. Small scale, and then it goes on to talk about small scale rural exception policies, but in effect what it is saying is there isn't a per se ban on development outside development boundaries, but there are criteria that have to be met. So in your assessment of this proposal, and in particular whether you could refuse the proposal with any chance of success at appeal, you would need to demonstrate clearly that the benefits of the scheme are clearly outweighed by the disbenefits in terms of the character and appearance of landscapes and the built environment and harm to biodiversity. So that is really the test that is before you this evening. and your officers have clearly advised you that whilst there is inevitably a small degree of residual landscape harm, as there is inherent to the development of any greenfield site, inevitably it changes from being green to built. However, over the years, obviously the vegetation on the new development would mature, and to some degree, any residual harm would gradually be robbed and diminish over years. So in terms of landscape harm, we would advise you that we consider it to be really quite small, and whilst no harm is immaterial, we have to set that against the planning benefits of providing new homes in a sustainable location, and in the context of increased weight being afforded to housing delivery policies. As we anticipate, in February, we will no longer have a 5-year housing land supply. We have been advised by, we've taken legal advice, and we are advised that this situation is a material planning consideration in reaching decisions between now and February. That we must anticipate the fact that by February, when the standard methodology of 1,300 homes per year will kick in, we will no longer be able to demonstrate 5-year housing land supply. At the present time, we can demonstrate just a very marginal 5-year housing land supply. But the legal advice we have received is that in the planning balance, we need to take that into account. So I just wanted to run through those, and you've indulged me. I'm a grateful committee for you for doing that, because I wasn't being able to be here at the last committee. But I felt quite important to counsel you against refusing this application unless, in your opinion, we can demonstrate that the harm associated with this scheme would outweigh the benefits. And in particular, the OV2, our own local plan policy, would not be complied with in terms of the points that are presently on the screen. Because in my opinion, there is no demonstrable conflict with the neighbourhood plan. And I think you need to have regard to that fact. We are incredibly supportive of the neighbourhood plan, but PP9 and PP12 do not per se preclude development adjoining the development boundary within the context of our wider strategic policy SP3 in our adopted local plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. So I'll now invite members of the committee to ask questions and discuss the risk report only that we've heard tonight. I can see Councillor Davison has indicated to speak, and after him, Councillor Pearson, who I'd ask you to be ready to speak when Councillor Davison finishes.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Again, it's very frustrating for West Burgolt because they've, in good faith, put a neighbourhood plan together. But unfortunately, our Colchester Council policies are open-worded and do not allow that definitive objective. And I noticed in those policies that it was a minimum of 120, which West Burgolt has already delivered, and of course it's not a maximum. So I think, I'd like to think that in future, the Colchester Council would negotiate or engage with the parish councils to make sure that everybody was clear what was being delivered and what could be restricted. Equally, the slope, the green area that Mr. Cairns showed, I'm amused to see that actually one of those areas is actually in the potential plan that we're coming forward with, even though it's not coalescent. So I'm as a planning committee, we're frustrated and limited by what we can do. Mr. Cairns was also very helpful at the briefing last night in that obviously the other objective is 6 or 7 houses. There's considerable green growth and trees on the site, and we're not convinced, and officers have yet to see a plan allowing for 7 houses. So I'd like it to come back to committee to approve the 7 if that's what they finally determined to go with. I think that's more than reasonable. Apart from that, I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Pearson. And after Councillor Pearson, can Councillor Gocher be ready to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 quick questions for our planning officers. One, in terms of the local plan, what's the definition of small scale? I notice this is only 7, so it probably fits within that. The second question that I wanted to ask, though, is it also refers to local affordable housing need. I didn't see anything in here about any affordable housing amongst those 7. So is that something that we could or couldn't take into account in coming to our decision this evening?
Thank you. Councillor Gocher.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr Cairns for his contribution, because it's very, very useful to have the policies explained fully in that way. It just seems very frustrating indeed. It seems to me that policy SP9 isn't robustly enough worded to preclude development outside of the settlement boundary, as has been explained by officers. And I'm trying to get to the bottom of whether that is because when the neighbourhood plan was written, it was assumed by those who wrote it that any reasonable person would think that what they had written would preclude development outside of the boundary, or whether inserting wording to that nature that was more robust is not allowed in a neighbourhood plan. That's what I'm really trying to get to the bottom of, because to me, this whole thing, this whole issue, it renders neighbourhood plans rather pointless, because as officers have very well explained, policy, I think it was OV2 of the local plan, which is about development in the countryside, does seem to overrule what neighbourhood plans can preclude. So I don't understand why. Well, I'll rephrase that. I can understand why local residents will be very, very confused by all of this, because in their mind they may well think that a neighbourhood plan sets out where development should take place within the neighbourhood, and of course, as has been explained tonight, it is much more complicated than that. But I think it would be useful to have that explained. I also think, for the benefit of anyone watching this live on YouTube or whatever, it would be good to have an explanation of the February situation, that a layperson watching this could understand. How have we got into this position where we can't demonstrate a 5-year housing supply? What has caused this? And obviously, we've had some suggestions of how we might start to dig ourselves out of it, but how have we got to this stage? Because again, I don't think that there is an understanding of this outside. But those are my points for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gocher. I'll ask the officers to respond to the questions asked and the points made during the debate.
Chair, I'll answer one of the points and then Simon can take over, if that's all right. Just on the point of the issue about the numbers on the site, the description is up to 7. So that doesn't mean 6 are acceptable either. It's up to 7. Just to clarify, we haven't seen evidence that you could get 7 on the site in terms of not affecting trees. The illustrative plan shows 6. We think you probably could get 6 without too much detriment to the trees, but again, that would need to be demonstrated at the reserve matters stage. If it can't be demonstrated that reserve matters stage that you can't get 6 or 7, then you'd have to go lower, 4 or 5. But we think on balance you could probably get 6, but we're not convinced about 7. If you reduce the size of the dwellings, you may be able to get 7, but we're not convinced. So then I'll just pass over to Simon now about the definition of small-scale development and PP9 not being robust and the neighbourhood plan being rather pointless.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. So dealing with Councillor Davidson's very astute point that reserve matters could be brought back to committee. Whilst we do have full delegation on reserve matters, we'd be happy to bring it back. So that will give you another bite of the cherry and ensure that no trees are harmed in the course of this development. So that hopefully will tick that big box. In terms of the affordable housing, unfortunately, under 10 units, i.e. minor applications, only in a list of parishes which is currently submitted and awaiting parliamentary approval for this authority, will we be in a position in certain communities to require contributions for under 10. Unfortunately, West Bergholt is not one of them because it's too big, I'm afraid. So under 10s, we will never be able to squeeze affordable housing, I'm afraid, in West Bergholt. So in terms of what small scale, less than 10, really. I would say, but small scale in terms of our plan policy, I think means not major strategic scale applications, depending on which policy we're looking at. In terms of the wording of PP9, I think it's a really interesting one. Our local plan clearly has policies which align with national policy insofar as there was a time when I was a young planner many moons ago when we had a lovely simple life and it was either one side of the line or it was t'other, and we could just stamp it approved or say go away because it was on the wrong side of the line. Unfortunately, going back to 2012, the government simplified all of those many thousands of pages of planning policy into 56 pages, and at the stroke of a pen, the intrinsic protection from the countryside disappeared for its own sake. And we are now in a situation where, subject to there being no demonstrable harm, development may come forward outside those, within or adjacent to those development boundaries. Our own local plan policy, SP3, the strategic policy, allows for that eventuality. OV2, as we've heard, permits development in the countryside as long as it causes no harm. And in the countryside means the other side of the red line. So it doesn't mean, out there in the middle of nowhere. Clearly that wouldn't be acceptable as being unsustainable, poorly related to settlement form. So in terms of the wording of PP9, I would say if the policy had said there shall be no development outside the development boundary, I don't think that would have got through the conformity test with the parent plan, because our parent local plan doesn't say that. It says you can have development adjoining the settlement boundary and in open countryside, providing the criteria in OV2 are met. And consequently, I think other neighbourhood plans, which are more recent than this one, such as Tiptree, do caveat their policy and say outside the development boundary, residential development will not normally be permitted unless the criteria in OV2 are met. So that one has evolved into a slightly more sophisticated beast. But I'm afraid this does not actually technically say you can't have it. And also, the other policy, so we fall back on OV2 of the parent plan, and also PP12, the coalescence one, I think we would be laughed out of court if we tried to argue as coalescence for the obvious reasons you've seen on the screen. It really is a pimple on the edge of the settlement in terms of the area of space between West Bergholt settlement and Braeswick. Now, I know it does say incrementally, but you would need tens of thousands of those applications to incrementally result in coalescence. So I think that argument fails. In terms of, Councillor Goetcher raised the issue of 5-year housing land supply and how did we get here. We get here because on the 1st or maybe the 2nd of February, I think it's the 2nd when it was adopted, the Part 1 local plan, our local plans, you're probably aware, is in two parts, Section 1 and Section 2. The strategic Section 1 goes out of date on the 1st of February. And consequently, the methodology to be applied for calculating housing land supply switches to the new methodology which was brought in the December 2024 NPPF. And that is the 1,300 dwellings per annum. And whilst we may at the moment have the 920, we certainly do not have 1,300 unless something dramatic happens overnight, which we all pray for, but I think the reality is we will not be in that position rationally. So we need to plan for that eventuality. How do we get out of this? We get out of this by having an new adopted local plan. And that's the challenge for your colleagues on the local plan committee and full council in due course. We need, obviously, to progress the local plan to Regulation 18 so we can start to rebuild our armour against speculative development. Hopefully, Chair, that's answered those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Have you anything to add to this, Councillor Pearson? Otherwise, we'll progress because we're approaching the need to stop.
Just very quickly, Chair. One, the wording in OVB2 is obviously redundant because you can't have affordable housing in a off-plan development because it will never be above 10 because that's a small scale. The second point I was going to make is let's go with the flow, and I move that we approve.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is a motion on the table, and that was the motion that Councillor Gocher originally moved, which was to refuse the application. So can I ask Councillor Gocher whether he wishes to proceed with the motion proposed at the previous committee?
No, Chair, I will withdraw that at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. So therefore, so we are now going, just let me clarify with the clerk what it is we're going to debate, okay? Yes, I'm about to open the floor to invite alternative proposals to the one that Councillor Gocher has just withdrawn, and I can see that Councillor Davison wishes to speak. Anyone else that does, please indicate to Mick. Go ahead, Dave. Robert.
Chair, with respect, I did actually make a proposal prior to Councillor Gocher withdrawing his.
That's a good point you make, and thank you for pointing that out. Now the motion has been withdrawn. Yes, your motion is on the table, so can you just remind members what that motion is?
So it's in line with the officer's guidance and proposal this evening, because unfortunately I've closed my laptop down. I propose that we accept the officer's guidance and
the original recommendation, yeah? Okay. Simon, do you wish to come in there?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, can I add Councillor Davison's addendum that the reserve matters are brought back to this committee's consideration?
I'm happy to accept that.
Right, so that's been accepted and incorporated into the proposal. Is there a seconder for it? Councillor Davison. Anyone wishes to speak on it? All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions?
One.
Okay, can you read the result, please?
Thank you, Chair. There's 8 in favour, 1 against and 1 abstention. The motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you. And the original officer's recommendation, along with the addition to bring the reserve matters back to the committee, is passed. Thank you all for your time this evening.